Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. This is Jacob, and this evening on the podcast, I'm going to speak with Desiree. Desiree, how are you this evening?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Great, you're welcome. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
I would introduce myself as a single mom, a divorced single mom. I work as a substance abuse counselor. I've done that for 8 years. I'm 28. I did get into the field very young. It's funny because I look young, and every time I get a new job or whatever, you don't even look like you're 18. It's so funny. So yeah, and I'm from California, Ventura, California, and those are probably the main things and how I would introduce myself for sure.
All right. Yeah, the guests won't be able to see because it's obviously a podcast, but you do look young for 28 for sure. That's interesting. You've been a substance abuse counselor for 8 years, got into it really young, yeah. And that would be interesting to talk a little bit about that with your story in general.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, what do you like to do for fun when you're not working or being a parent?
Yeah. So a new thing is I have my kids 50% of the time. So I started getting into surfing. So I picked up a new hobby and I surf and any chance I get, really. Yeah, and just that was actually a huge part in my addiction as well, was that last year I think it escalated very quickly because of the time I had alone. Yeah, without my kids. So it was more so, again, a lot of the stories I hear, and maybe I'll talk about it in a little bit, but yeah, it definitely had to play into it for sure. But yeah, on my free time, I do surf and go to the beach and do yoga and just exercise or do little things like that.
Nice. Yeah. I live on the East Coast. I used to do some surfing, but not much anymore. I like to snowboard these days. But
yeah. It's definitely
it's easier to do here.
Yeah, where you live for sure. Colorado is huge on snowboarding or skiing and all that mountain stuff, hiking. And California is known for surf.
Yeah, and there's a pretty big snowboard culture in Tahoe and stuff, but that's a ways away from Ventura.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool. We could talk about that all night, but let's maybe get into some of the not so fun stuff. Obviously, you're on a podcast about kratom sobriety, so tell me a little bit about how you first encountered kratom and when you first came to try it.
I'm in recovery. Obviously, motivated me to get into the field of addiction.
Okay, so maybe let's take a step back since you mentioned that. So it sounds like you have a history of maybe some substance abuse from, I would say, youngish age if you got into substance abuse at 20. So maybe just touch on that and then let's talk about the kratom.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a whole reason. In childhood environment, I was exposed to substances since I can remember at a very young age. So eventually I got into heavy drugs. I was in foster care. It was very comfortable for me in that environment. So I started using, my drug of choice was amphetamines. And then I had my daughter, which motivated me to get clean. It was tough. I did eventually get clean, I think 20. And then I was 2 months clean. And then that's when I found a program at the community college, and it was for substance abuse studies. So that's really what helped me stay clean, actually, and a spiritual foundation. But yeah, for sure. And then, so I stayed clean for about a few years, and then I relapsed in 2021 on alcohol.
Okay.
And then I was hiding it. I was so good at hiding it, man. In that for 2 years. And then last year, January of 2024, is when I found kratom. I feel like the marketing kind of targets a certain type of addict.
I think it does too, yeah.
What I've gathered, because I've listened to this podcast and a lot of the episodes, and I'm on the Reddit pages and I'm on the little underground communities, and that's what I've gathered. But I was clean from alcohol for about 3 weeks, and then I found
the kava-kratom drinks. When did you said that was around last January?
January, a complete year.
What was your first experience like? Was it just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. When I first found it, never stopped. It was like, it's so funny. All the stories I hear, it's not funny, but it's just interesting how when I started really looking into it just recently, I was listening to people saying the same thing that I was saying to myself in the past year, right? Of, man, I found this miracle. Oh my gosh, I'm not drunk. I'm not under the influence. I can talk to people.
Yep.
This is amazing. How could this be bad? And I never knew about kratom. I did not know about kratom at all. So I would see that bottle when I was drinking alcohol. I would go to the liquor store and I would see that, and I was interested because I would see it. Not many people buy it, but I would see some people like get it. And I was curious. Sometimes I'd ask, what is that? And they would say, oh, it's a non-alcoholic energy drink. And never picked it up. Because I was drinking. And so then I did, because I got clean for 3 weeks, not because I wanted to, but because of circumstances. So I was clean for 3 weeks. I did not want to be. And then I found it. And it was just this miracle thing that I found, that I thought it was a miracle in the beginning. And then the usual story of it was one a day. And you know what?
Okay.
I will say is, I remember taking one and it lasting a few hours.
Yeah.
I remember, yeah. And so now eventually got to the point where it was 20 minutes, 45 minutes every hour. So one eventually led to 10 to 12 bottles a day. I would say from
How fast
October.
did that take? Was it like the first couple months it was like one, then the next couple, like a month in, it was like two, then it was like three, it was like one, then it was two next week, then
Yeah. So I will say about the 6-month mark is when I started to remember. In the beginning, I didn't need to have one on me at all times. So I could go to out of town to a Dodger game or a trip or whatever. And I would have one before, but I didn't need to have one on me at all times. Eventually, around August, maybe a little bit sooner than that, it started escalating. But I would say by August is when I needed to have one at all times. October is when I can really remember that it escalated to I needed one at all times, and I needed one in the morning, like already ready. I
Okay, so
remember
you had already like planned at night that you had to have one already stocked away. Yeah, okay. I did that too.
There would be times where I would freak out, wake up, and freak out that I didn't go get one the night before. I would get panicked because I remember, and mind you, I've never been physically dependent on a substance. So when I was in my alcoholism, I was a night drinker. I would work in the day, drink in the night.
Okay. Yeah, I was similar with that too.
Yeah. So I knew and calculated how much I could drink to the point where I made sure that I wasn't sick. There would be times I would be sick, but it wasn't anything like this. So I would say about August, September, October is when I would wake up and I would get a little freaked out because I would have a runny nose, or it'd be a couple hours and I would feel a little antsy. Or I had one specific friend who knew. Nobody else knew. Nobody knew about this. I had one friend who knew, and he pointed it out. And I didn't correlate it to that, though. He was like, oh, you're like, are you okay? You're a little antsy more than usual. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. While he was saying that, I was on the way to the store to get one. So it was just little like signs, but I didn't relate it to that. And then my skin started drying out, and I had someone very close to me who we started drinking them together. I won't go too much into that just to respect him, but I say this because he pointed it out that my skin was really dry and said it was because of the drinks. And I said, no, it's not. It's because I surf. And he goes, no, it's not. It's because of the drinks. And I swore that it wasn't because I didn't think it would cause my skin to do that.
Yeah.
Until it wasn't going away. And then I was like, okay, yeah, no, this, mind you, this whole time I was terrified to look up anything online. I
Okay.
was
Yeah, you didn't want to know the truth.
I did not want to know the truth, no.
Yeah.
In the back of my mind and my heart, I knew, but
Yeah.
once I knew, then I was responsible.
Yeah, you can't unlearn once you learn. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What ultimately, so you go from you start taking one a day last January, and then by October, you're like really ramping up your usage. How bad did it get, and what made you say, oh, I got to do something about this?
Yeah, I've looked up the overuse symptoms, and I checked off 13 of those symptoms. So I had eye infections. My skin was completely dry. It was flaking off every time I'd take off my clothes. My hair was extremely dry. I had menstrual cycle problems. I actually went to the hospital 3 times last year to get help. And they had no idea what it was. They gave me hydroxyzine and an antidepressant. And he offered me subs. I denied them because I know about them and I didn't want to step into that. So, yeah, I had extreme dry skin, eye infections. What else? Stomach issues. I was vomiting. My mental health was declining extremely. I have never suffered with mental health like that. It had never gotten that bad. It was extremely bad that I was suicidal at times, contemplating driving down to the psychiatric hospital. It was extremely bad.
I had a similar experience with, it's something with like high dosage, I think, personally, anecdotally. It seems like high dosage kratom usage can give you that deep depression when you're coming down off of it, or not when you don't have it, or when you're trying to contemplate getting off it. It's just, it brings you to a very dark place.
Yes. Yeah. So I had so many symptoms. It was wild. But I think the one that really caused me to really stop was I knew my kidneys. So that was another one. Sorry. I was extremely backed up. I couldn't use the restroom. That kind of went on throughout the whole time, but it was getting worse the higher increase I was using. And then the eye infection. And so I felt like my liver and my kidneys were shutting down. So
your body was like screaming at you from all aspects to do something.
And it was getting to the point. So a few days before I got clean, maybe a week, I wasn't eating. Every time I would get hungry, I would drink another one and I would drink another one. I was not eating. And I would try to eat a little bit, like a little bit of soup. And my stomach couldn't even handle that. Food was not even part of my day. It was getting to that point. Nobody knew. I had my kids were extremely sick, had the flu, and they were sick while I was sick from this. And this is when the peak of my mental health was just going insane. I finally called my sister and I said, hey, I need you to come over here. She lives in Mexico. Again, it makes it hard because I don't have parents it makes it a little bit harder for the help. So I called my sister and I said, hey, I need you to come help me because I need to get off of this. She already knew I would take them, but she didn't know what it was. Yeah. She would come down a few times and she would see or she would ask me about him. So she knew, but didn't know the depth of it. So I explained to her and she came and she helped me and she helped me go through the withdrawals. Extremely horrible.
And when was this?
So this was this was like the end of December.
Okay, so like a couple weeks ago, basically.
Yeah, days today.
Okay. All right, so you have no relapses or anything. So you got to the point basically in late December around the holidays where you were like, I just can't do this anymore. So your sister
Yeah.
came and helped.
Yeah.
What was the withdrawal period like? Like what were your symptoms and how long did it take to get through that?
The withdrawal symptoms were, I mean, everything. It was the restless legs. My legs couldn't stop
Okay.
moving. My nose was runny. I couldn't even really stand up. I was just down. My body hurt. I didn't want to eat. I would say the insomnia. And to be honest, the insomnia, I still have that where I'm
It takes a
tired.
little while.
Yeah. Yeah, is what I'm gathering because I still have it. So yeah, I went through that. I would say the withdrawals lasted, the extreme withdrawals, I would say about 3 to 4 days. And then after that, the restless legs subsided and I was able to relax in bed and go to and get a little bit more and more sleep. And yeah, but during that period, I if my sister wasn't here, I don't think I would have been able to get through it. I had to give her my car keys because if not, I think it was really hard for me to continue. And she just hearing her words of encouragement really helped. Just being accountable. I was I was even terrified to drive to work once I felt better because I did take off time from work.
Okay, good. That's good.
Yeah. And I was even talking about I asked her, I said, "Hey, would you be able to drive me to work?" Because I was scared that I was going to stop at the store. We ended up not needing to do that because another thing is when I went back to work, I got let go.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Um,
Dave.
I believe it's related to the use because, of course, your performance starts declining. And
Yeah.
I have, in my 8 years that I've been working in this field, I have never been let go of a job. I think that says something. And deep down in my heart, I know that it's related to my use.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be accountable as an addict, right? And I think I don't know you, I didn't work with you, but I think we all can look back on things, and if you're saying it, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's you have to learn sometimes through these things, and it sucks that happened. But hopefully,
Yeah.
you've got some plans and can get back in the workforce real quickly here.
Yeah, I do. So I'm already in working again.
Oh, good.
It's funny, actually, it's really crazy how it all worked out. I could feel it coming. So a lot of it felt it's the way I can explain it before I got clean is everything in my life started to cave in.
Yeah.
Relationships, my job, money, and my mental health. Everything. It's like everything was like caving in where I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't do anything. I needed to get clean.
Yeah, you got to your rock bottom, basically. You couldn't
Yes. It
get
was
any lower. You could,
yeah,
but
yes. It Another thing too is that I wasn't even able financially for my home. It was like in question. I was dipping things that my morals and values and my responsibilities were not being prioritized at all. It was on the back burner and it was not me. And it really overtook me. And yeah, it was insane.
yeah. It sounds like you had a pretty dramatic rise and a pretty dramatic fall, I would say, on kind of the scale of usage of the substance. And you did a lot of brave things when you got to the point where you're like, I just can't keep doing this. You made a plan, you called your sister, you took off time from work, you did what you had to do to get clean, and you've got 21 days now, and that's amazing. And you had to go through a lot of crap to get there. So coming out of this experience, what are you thinking about doing to maintain recovery? Obviously, you work in the field, so you
Yeah.
probably got some pretty powerful tools from that. But what's your
Yeah.
plan for sobriety moving forward?
So I work 12-step program. I work with my sponsor. I'm very connected to my church. spirituality. And look, I know relapse is part of a lot of one's story, and I know it could be for me. I'm not naive to that, and I would say that I am on pink cloud because getting out of that and you start to see things more clear and it's like all of my senses are back and it feels really good. So I'm very aware of that, and I'm working for that. I think I heard someone say, I can't say, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. And I'm not naive to the idea that for any of us in recovery, we're all just one decision away from going back. But I will say this is that I try to be wise, and being wise is learning from others so we don't have to do it to ourselves. That's why the program is there, right? You walk into a meeting and you hear people's stories and you say, okay, it doesn't have to get there. Like it's already gone as far as it has, and it could stop there. So I'm just trying to keep that in mind of the whole, again, I actually have my AA book right here and I read the page 31 of every time we think that we can just have one, right? That's history shows that's not possible. And I always, that's usually where it starts, right? Is, oh, I could just have one, or it's just one, or just one day, right? And we've tried that so many times.
Oh God, yeah, I have too. Yeah, it doesn't work. The moderation myth is for an addict is just such a nightmare, and it's just so tiresome. Like it's so much. It's honestly just so much easier. Like I don't want to just have a beer. I can tell myself that, but I want to have 15. I don't want to have one kratom extract. I want to have the whole case.
Yeah,
it's not like there's no end to that demon when you start to open it, more or less. I don't know.
Yeah.
Were you going and active in your program when you were using kratom, or when you had slipped and started drinking again? Just curious.
Yeah. So to be honest, yes, I was.
Okay, no, it's good to be honest.
Yeah. I talked to my sponsor and she's like, just be honest. So I was taking dirty chips, and I was being just a complete liar and secretive and just like this whole other person that was not what I was saying I was.
Look, it's so hard to, go and do all the work to get there, and then to have a relapse or to switch substances and get into another addiction. So I went to Smart Recovery for half the time that I was using kratom, and at first I would have said I was clean because I believed I was. But
that told my sponsor the other day. I said, the crazy part about it is I convinced myself that I was clean. I was like, it's at 7-Eleven. There is no way that I am dirty. No, that's not true. So I convinced myself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So many people that get into kratom that had a previous substance that, got into it because they were looking for something to help them not use drugs or alcohol, and then they find it, and then it works, and it can be a functional high until you start really, using a ton of it, but eventually you figure it out.
Yeah. Eventually, again, it's like the point of surrender. I read this. So when I started looking up all the Reddit pages and TikToks and all this stuff, and there was a guy and he was talking about, I don't know, someone posted, oh, it's a coffee root or something, right? And it's funny because
it's from the coffee family. Yeah, that's like a common thing.
So I used to say that all the time, actually. I used to always say, it's coffee. Or if my friend or cousin asked, I'd say, oh, yeah, it's a coffee thing and drink. And so that was my excuse, right? And it got to the point that I don't even care what's in it. Kratom, I am to the point where whatever is in it is destroying my life, right? Like,
yeah, it doesn't matter.
It's gotten me to the point that I am in full blown addiction cycle and I cannot stop. I would wake up every single day saying I was going to taper and cut back, and I was going back to drinking 10 to 12. Sometimes I believe that I lost count. So I noticed towards the end is because it would give me energy. And I noticed that towards the end, the longer I was staying awake, the more I was drinking them. So I noticed a few weeks before I was staying up midnight. So then I was drinking more and more to stay up. So then those days, I believe I was drinking a little bit more. I was looking internally ill. Like my eyes were so sunken in. I look at photos, man, and it's just so sad.
Yeah. Well, the good news is you're on the other side of it now and you're back working your program and you're being honest and you've got 21 days. If now that you've gone through the experience and if another person was to come to you and ask you for help and they're saying, hey, I'm drinking 10 of these kava-kratom drinks a day and my life is a mess and I don't know what to do, what's the first or the top thing you'd recommend they do?
This is what helped me is the honesty. The honesty with myself and the honesty with others. The honesty with others, I believe, is how I've gotten to 21 days. I have been completely honest with every person that matters. I don't want to say that matters. I'm sorry. That because I heard someone else say this, I think it was on the podcast, that sometimes we could be honest with someone that doesn't I told some people and they said, oh, okay, like they don't really understand.
Yeah. I'm not gonna go tell all my coworkers about all my addiction struggles because it's like not really relevant.
But I will say, being honest with my sister, it was like word vomit. That it's just all this stuff that I held inside that I'm willing and ready to be honest. And again, that's what's helped me a lot because it just feels so like relief, right? Because a big part of it was the secret. It was making me so sick and making my mental health and the addiction worse, right? Because I kept drinking them and just in the cycle. So I will say just being honest, right? And coming up with a plan. So just of how can we do this? And then but I would say the biggest key is being honest. And I get it. Sometimes we're in a position it's hard.
It is hard, yeah.
It is hard to be honest about it. There were times I wanted to say something, but my job kept me in the cycle, right? Because I couldn't. My job is how I provide for my children and myself. And it's like this tricky thing where it's okay, but I can't take time off of work. I can't go to a detox center for a week. I have my job. I have my children. I have all of these things that it made it so hard. Eventually, I had to take time off. I had to do what I had to do, or else I don't know what would have happened.
You don't, at the end of the day, if you don't, it's all the things you said, I could repeat it, but basically until you get honest with yourself and with at least one person, preferably more than one person in your life that you can be accountable to, it's going to be very hard to make the changes stick. And like you said, everybody's has things going on in their life that they can't, that are a good reason why they can't do something. Those things won't be there if you continue to use because you're just going to go further and further into the depths and you're going to lose that too. So there's really no way out of it. I am curious, in your line of work, do you ever encounter anybody that has addiction to kratom, and have you worked with anybody? Okay, interesting.
So in the past, I would say the past year, we started seeing clients come in for kratom. I would say right now where it's about 1 to 2 out of 30 to 40 clients that are coming in for kratom.
Okay, pretty good. Not good, but pretty decent amount of people.
But you're seeing it more often.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely, because before we wouldn't see that just
Probably
a few years ago. No, not at all. And another thing too, I don't know if it's maybe I was paying attention more, but even just going into the stores over the past when I first started buying it a year ago, I would never see people buying it. I would say the end of last year, I started seeing a lot more people buying it, the feel-free bottles. And I would always make conversation, and every single time they would say, I'm trying to quit. and I can't stop. It's crazy. I don't, it's like this weird, because even sometimes someone would see me buy it and say, oh, you drink those too? Or when, so it's just.
Yeah, I think I said it at some point. I think I did on the podcast, and I don't remember when. It's probably like 8 months ago now, maybe even longer. But I saw one of the guys at the smoke shop that I used to go to. I live in a relatively large urban area, and I was just he was walking one way in the street and I was walking on the other, and he's, oh, I haven't seen you in a long time. And I was like, yeah, because I stopped buying all that shit. And he was like, good for you, man. He's like, I got so many people that are just come in every day and they always tell me they're trying to quit and then they're back the next day. So I was like, yeah, you guys probably make most of your money off that product. He's like, it's a good amount.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. So
true.
it is definitely everywhere and seems to be in more and more places.
And you said this before, where I think the problem is how it's in markets, right? And I'm not saying it should only be in a specific area, maybe smoke shops or whatever, right? Because I wouldn't have found it if it was in a smoke shop. And I'm not saying that it should be in a smoke shop and only smokers should know about it. I'm just saying that it can target a lot of even young kids, right? If I would have known about that, and when I was in high school, I would have like totally been all over it and escalated into more extreme things, right? Because I remember just last year, I would have thoughts of, oh man, it would be cheaper if I would go to the streets and get something. If my thoughts of who I am today escalated to that, if I was younger in my addiction, I would have escalated quickly to harder substances, I believe, right? We never know, but it's just the fact that it's just open, so available and easy accessible to the community.
Yeah.
And I believe it shouldn't be like that.
I was actually talking this week to a couple people at the local Smart Recovery meeting that I go to every week, and some of the newer people that have been coming in that are mostly on like fentanyl have been saying that they've been like buying the 7-OH products because when they like can't get fentanyl, those are like the closest thing, and they actually work really well. They don't necessarily get them high because their tolerance is so out of the world from the really hard opiates, but they take them, they work to keep them, I guess.
Yeah.
But so I did talk to a young woman too. I think it was about a year ago. Britt, I think was her name. And she was in Florida, and they have kava bars down there that sell kratom. And she said that when her and her friends were like 15, they would go and get kratom drinks. So I'm sure there's plenty of young people that are finding this and using it. I know I would have probably if I was a teenager now.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess a few more things, and then we can wrap up here. We do have some exciting news. Desiree is going to actually be joining the podcast team as a co-host. Wanted to get her story out there and let her interview air, but she'll be joining us to do some interviews and some segments.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that. I think it'll be nice for me to keep involved and just sometimes just reminded. I've heard that before too, of the podcast, of how it's a reminder as well. So not only does it help, it helps in so many ways, right? For the host, for the listener, for the audience,
it's good to give back to the community, and then to help yourself stay accountable. That's one of the reasons I do it too. And I think it'll be cool that with your background from being a substance abuse counselor, it'll be good.
Yeah.
I guess I've got one more question, and then you can ask me any questions or anything else you want to tell the audience. So I guess what's the coolest like concert or live event you've ever been to?
Oh, I love these questions. I like these questions because it's nice to feed us, right? Who we are. Our addiction is a part of our story, but also who we are.
We're also people,
So there's I love that. I love reggae, so I love every single reggae concert, every reggae band. I would say Fortunate Youth. I've seen Fortunate Youth in concert, and they are probably one of my favorites. It's funny, me and my son, so there's this platform called Sugar Shack, and they do live performances. And instead of watching TV, we watch the reggae bands perform on Sugar Shack.
that's cool.
Yeah, super cool. So
Awesome.
I love reggae.
I like some reggae myself, so that's cool.
Yeah, my daughter, we went to go watch Wicked, and I said, yeah, I don't really like the musicals. And then she said, but if it was reggae, you would like it. It was so
Make a reggae musical. That could be cool.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up tonight, is there any questions I didn't ask you that you want to share with the audience or anything else? Any questions you want to ask me?
Yeah, I will say that it's just a repeat of I've heard a lot. It's the whole kratom thing is in the beginning it seems the way that I describe it is it's this thing that's so good and a lifesaver or whatever the case is until it bites us in the ass later. And that's the way that I could describe it. And it's really scary. And I would just say, I don't know, just be aware of it and take caution and precaution. And yeah, I think that's all I would say. And for you, how long have you been clean?
I have been clean now for 19 months.
Yes. That's awesome.
Yeah. Looking forward to 2 years. I just, this week, actually last week was 6 years since I had any alcohol, so that was good for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just trying to just keep on.
Yeah. Do you notice that now, do you feel further, like, technically you are further away from the alcohol, but do you feel like kratom is a bigger problem for you now?
That's a good question. To be honest with you, yes, for the most part. The only exception is like when it's really nice out and I'm outside with a bunch of people and they're drinking. Sometimes I get that, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have just one? But as we talked about, it'll never be one. But yes, for the most part, I would probably gravitate to kratom over alcohol for a couple of reasons. One, it's more functional and easier to hide. And two, I think it works better overall. You don't have to take with alcohol. It's like you always have to have a drink, right? Once you start, you cannot have a drink. With kratom, at least you can get to a point where every 2 hours or something you have to take it. They're both terrible, but I think kratom would probably be what is the bigger thing I think about.
Yeah, I could say the cravings, and obviously it's pretty fresh off of the kratom use, so maybe that's why. But I will say that kratom is probably a little bit more triggering.
Yeah.
Than the alcohol. I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's all bad, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, like I said, it's all the substance.
It all leads to the same bad end, most likely for people like us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you again for chatting with us. If anybody has any questions or wants to get a hold of you, we'll pass their info your way. But other than that, yeah, you're welcome. And we'll be excited to have you on the podcast and to get this out there and then to have you do some interviews.